And so we'll be looking at something else now, but this time around, I want to look at his work globally and his experience of the Russia-Ukraine war. You know, Dr. Adelaja Femi has his church in Ukraine. And so the invasion of Ukraine by Russia affected a lot of things, a lot of people. And he was there at a time in 2022 when the war broke out. So we need to know what his experience has been like. Because in a video that Dr. Sunday Adelaja posted in February 2022, he talked about how he and his wife had to escape from the besieged Kiev because his name was on the list of Russian President Vladimir Putin. So what exactly was he talking about? What was the experience like to be in that kind of situation?
I could imagine, you know, the pain, the suspense, you know, the disbelief, you know, when you as a pastor, you have a very huge congregation like that. His church, you know, before the invasion, you know, was the largest church across that area, you know, in Europe. So I can imagine the pain, the disbelief, and then the disappointment when that kind of people are looking up onto you. I can imagine his ordeal on that day when the war broke out, how to take care of his church members, you know, how to accommodate their welfare, their concern, even talking about his family. And these are things we would like to have that conversation with him. Glad to have you join us once again, Dr. Sunday Adelaja.
Thank you so much.
It's always been a pleasure having you around. We would like you to recall what actually happened, or where you were, or your ordeal, your experience with your congregation, the way it happened, the day the invasion of Ukraine, the war broke out. What was your experience? Can you share with us your ordeal, your experience, and then how have you been faring since then?
Thank you so much for this question. We had been hearing about the war coming, that the war was looming from Russia against Ukraine for about 2-3 months before it happened. And someone like myself, not just me, most people in Ukraine, there were some people who believed it, but maybe 70% of the people didn't really believe that it's possible. Because the Ukrainian and the Russian people are the same people, basically. It's just like saying the Egbas and the Ijebus, or we're talking about the the Ijebus and the Oyos. I mean, we are the same people. So, and to see that kind of thing happen was very devastating. So because we didn't believe in it, that the war was coming, we never made preparation enough to maybe get out earlier or hide ourselves, or even the church members, or protect people, because it just came suddenly. So I was sleeping in my room, in my house near Kiev, in the city of Bushi, and that Bushi city, or Irpen, was later known as a very famous place where war crime had taken place. Anyway, so at about 6 o'clock, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, we started hearing bombs like I never experienced in my life. We never had anything like this. We were awakened by this sound of explosions everywhere, shelling. Then I decided to look into the window and see what's happening. Then I saw rockets flying, fire everywhere, just across our house to a military airport near us. And then I even saw Russian soldiers dropping down from the helicopter. It was horrible and scary. So we decided that we were going to stay. But I was praying about it. Then I got a call from somebody who was highly placed in our society, from the government, and said, leave now. That Pastor Sunday, you have to leave. I said, why? And I knew that because the American government had warned Ukraine that there is a list of people that are going to be eliminated if they get to Kiev and the influencers of the country. And then this person was telling me, you are in that list. Your name is in that list. You've got to leave. My wife, being a pastor herself, she was very hesitant. She was saying, how do we live with all these members looking up to us? I said, we just have to just leave now, and then we'll take care of that later on. So, and in our house, when this thing started, a lot of people started rushing to our house. We had people staying in our house. We had a underground premises in our house. So even people who are not members of our church started staying in our house, and so we escaped. We escaped to Poland, and from there to Germany and to the West. And but then we have to make arrangement to help those people in our house also escape. And yeah, and up right now, maybe almost maybe 50% of our church members are scattered all over the world, different countries. And we still have members, about 50% are still left in Ukraine, and trying to escape and survive and maintain their faithful, their service to God despite the war.
So you are currently located now in Texas in the U.S. How has relocation impacted your ministry?
Of course, you are when you have to leave everything you have worked for the past 40 years of your life in a hurry in one day, and you couldn't even go to the bank to withdraw money, and you you have a house where you had people living in that house, and then you have thousands of members of your church. Then you have to live with a small bag, let's say handbag, and your wife and your family. It changes the course of your life entirely, completely. Yeah, it's something you would not wish for your enemy.
All right. There's this report about the president of Russia, Putin, targeting influencers. Why do you think you're on that list? Perhaps could it be because of your influence? I would like you to shed more light on this.
Oh, definitely, yes. Even before the war, a few years before then, I used to go to Russia from Ukraine, because Ukraine and Russia are neighbors. So whatever happens in one country affects the other. So our church was growing dynamically in Ukraine. So definitely we had a lot of Russians in our church as well in Ukraine. Then we started planting churches in Russia as well. We planted over 100 churches in Russia. But after we crossed the threshold of 100 churches, and we had a lot of churches that are very influential within Russia itself, even in Moscow. And I used to go there to do programs. One day, I was on my way to Russia, and then when I arrived at the airport in Moscow, I was detained. I was arrested. So, and then they said they had to send me back on the next available flight back to Ukraine. What is my crime? They gave me a paper that had been declared a persona non grata, and that President Putin and the Russian government see me as an agent of imperialism, or of the Western imperialism, and that the values that I preach is giving people freedom. And when people are experiencing freedom like that, they want that I'm encouraging people to obey God rather than the government. So anyway, I decided to protest this. We went to court. The court in Russia threw it out and said, you can't sue the government. So this was before the war. So before the war, I knew I was already in trouble with the Russian government. And they would not allow me to go in there. And they started attacking our churches in Russia. They started clasping down on them. So it was when they said I was on the list of the people that they were targeting in Ukraine, it was only natural, because I had been an enemy and a thorn in their flesh before them.
That's it. We must commend you for your courage, for your determination, and I think that's why you're being celebrated all over the world. I can imagine what you went through, and you are standing tall and strong. We commend you for that. Away from that, let's look at the ongoing war, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. How do you see things turning out? Do you think Russia can sustain this war? And then Ukraine, do you think this counter-offensive, they can also sustain it? How do you see things panning out when it comes to this ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine?
Every war always ends on the table of negotiation. So I think that this war also will end with one kind of negotiation or the other. But also, no matter what happens in the history, even when nations and countries are annexed, nothing will ever take over Ukraine. Ukrainian people will remain. Ukraine will remain Ukraine. The people will remain the people, no matter the outcome of the war. Either we are going to win in the war, we are going to lose in the war, we remain. The people will remain, the country will remain. And so I'm not afraid of that. What is really breaking my heart is the fact that every day, young men, especially men and women also, but men, are dying. Maybe we have 1,000 people die, Ukrainians die every day since this war started. 1,000. Can you imagine 1,000 healthy men died a day? So that is so devastating. When you sustain that for 1 year, or even if it is 100 people dying every day, by the time you sustain that for 1 year, 2 years, that is heartbreaking. That is very sad. But I know that no matter what happens, God knows how to turn everything for good. The Bible says that everything works out for good for those who love him and are called by him. So I know that, like in the Acts of the Apostles, when the destruction came upon Jerusalem and the church there had to be scattered, we thought it was a tragedy. But that church went ahead to become the missionaries that we see all over the world. From that church, the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ spread to the four corners of the earth. There was something beautiful that came out of it. And the Jewish people spread all over the world, and the best scientists, the richest individuals in almost all parts of the world now are Jewish people. And there is a way God can turn any tragedy and anything that the enemy meant for evil to good in the long run. In the short term, it might look that it's not reasonable, it's not possible. But in the long run, something beautiful will come out of this war as well for Ukraine and for our people.
Okay, in recent times, we've seen that Russia has been doubling efforts to strengthen political and economic ties with African countries. Why is Africa important to Vladimir Putin? And should African leaders be concerned about this?
Well, with Putin, he's been cornered. He's been driven to the wall. His backs are at the wall right now because most countries that they used to trade with have rejected Russia. Most countries have declared Russia as a terrorist country. Maybe not all countries, but a lot of countries have done that. Maybe not as terrorists, but they have sanctions. They have declared sanctions against Russia. So they need new partners. They need new friends. And this is why they now turn to countries that they didn't pay too much attention to before now, like African countries. I think the part of it that is a bit worrying is the fact that the Wagner group and the military or the militarized Russia is entering into Africa. We don't need that. That is what our leaders have to be careful of. We don't need any military invasion of any African country. Unfortunately, a lot of African countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, are rather inviting them to come because they help them to fight the insurgents of Islamist insurgents. But that could backfire because we see what's happening in Ukraine, and everybody should learn from that, especially in Africa.
All right. In recent times, West Africa has been plagued by military uprisings and coup. The latest has to be that of Gabon. Now, talk to us. What are the lessons inherent in this for African leaders, and then what are the underlying factors that has to be taken into consideration for this uprising to cease and for us to have civilian being restored in in those countries?
Well, I think there is a message coming very loud and clear to all our leaders that you have to work for the improvement of people's lives. That if people's lives are not improved, if the standard of living of people are not improved, if people don't feel the benefit of democracy, that they are going to call for violence, they are going to call for regime change or even for coups. And these are the things that we are seeing in those countries. And so it's a loud call to all countries of Africa that work for the good of your people. And then corruption is another point that is another thing that is teaching us is that we must decry corruption, especially in the governments of Africa. As long as those corruptions are spreading and increasing in the government circles, people are going to keep on demonstrating and calling for intervention, either of military or of Russia or of external forces. So it's a big lesson that the government must sit tight, sit up, and begin to do everything possible to bring better life to their peoples.
Okay, there's been a new dimension to the quest for global influence by these three centers of power, the US, China, and Russia. And also the rivalry between US and China has increased. Do you see this leading to a new world order?
Well, that is the good part of it. That is one positive thing that everybody should celebrate in this whole tragedy. You see, in the beginning, I said this war that is happening between Ukraine and Russia will end up with something good. And one of the good part of it that is going to happen is the new world order that we are already beginning to experience. And the fact that recently there was this BRICS summit in South Africa, and where new members were accepted into BRICS, and these are new forces that are coming up in other parts of the world that are saying, things must be changed, and things cannot be the way they used to be before. And they are breaking the stronghold of neocolonialism of the West upon the southern countries, or countries of the South, and African countries, developing countries. So that is already bringing in a new world order. And some of the things that they are talking about is that they could now trade in their own currencies. So these countries would not be limited to trading only in US dollars or euros, but they could also trade in their own money, so which will facilitate a faster level of growth. And a lot of these countries are also embracing China, and China doesn't interfere too much in the political running of local countries. They mainly economic influence, but they are bringing a lot of leverage. And usually, when you have just one center of power, power corrupts, but absolute power, when there is only one superpower or there is only one center of power in the West, which is the West, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But when there is a dichotomy, when there is a pluralism, then there is a check and balance of some sort. So the fact that there is a new world order coming up, in the sense that there are different centers of power that are coming up in the world, is a good development for the world at large, especially for the third world countries.
On a lighter note, you were quoted as saying God told you to return home. May I ask, are we expecting you home soon? Are we expecting you coming home soon? And then what will be of your interest if you arrive here?
Yes, I have a strong burden to come back to Nigeria and Africa. And my primary assignment is not to come and build church. When I was in my 40 years sojourn in Europe, my platform was church and religion. But when I come back to Africa by the grace of God, I want to focus more on humanitarian work and on eradicating and or reducing poverty and reaching out to the less privileged. I want to also try my best to influence the already established churches in Africa to be more, to pay more attention, to be more people focused, to pay more attention to ordinary people and their plight, and to be less religious but more centers of love. So I want to encourage also industrialization of my continent and my country. I want to be able to bring a lot of Europeans to come with me and to help build and contribute to the development of Africa, just like I have contributed to the development of their countries and continent while I was here.
Okay, your church that you had in Ukraine before the invasion of Ukraine by Russia was predominantly a white congregation. What is your philosophy that endeared that kind of congregation to you?
Oh, beautiful question. What happened was that when I went there as a Christian from Nigeria, as a believer, we were taught from Nigeria that you have to evangelize, you have to preach the gospel. So, but despite all my efforts, I did it as much as I could. I tried my best. I did that. Tried different methods, but as much as I tried, I couldn't. For 4 years, I couldn't bring one white European to Christ. Europeans, my own gospel was just not affecting them. It was the only people who were coming to, I was the leader of a fellowship of students in the university, and the only people who were attracted to me who were coming were people from Africa, other African countries, Ghana, Liberia, other African countries, but not white Europeans. So this became a concern to me because how could I be living in a society where 99% of the people are white Europeans and I am only meeting with one group of black people, whereas the black people there are just 1% or less than 1%. And 99% of the people are not reaching out to them. So it became a sort of concern to me that if God wanted me to minister to black people, he would have left me in Africa where we have almost 1 billion of them. But here, they are not even, they are just very few. The billion people that we have here are white people. So I began to search and look for ways to reach out to them. I began to question my methods. I began to question my knowledge. And I began to question my approach. And at the end of the day, I discovered that the problem was not with the gospel. The problem was with me, with my mindset, with my worldview, with my concept of evangelism that I had brought from Africa, that it will not work here. And for me to be effective on this continent, I've got to embrace them, their culture, and I've got to embrace and be able to interpret the gospel in their own language, in their culture, in their circumstances, and be able to use their philosophy to be able to minister to them. So this is what I began to do, and God helped me in the process, and to the extent that our church became a church of 99 point something percent white, and yeah, we succeeded. And now I have a lot of experience in ministering cross-culturally, to be able to minister to people of other cultures, especially to white Europeans or Americans or people like that. It's now very easy for me to do.
On a final note, just on a lighter mood, what do you miss about Africa? Could it be your favorite food in Africa, your favorite sport in Africa? What do you miss about Africa?
The greatest thing I missed about Africa, which is one of my little regrets, which is still correctable, is the fact that I can't speak my language anymore. First of all, because when I began to work on my Russian, and you don't see many people speak Yoruba here. So I just, but we're just speaking Russian all the time. The only time you see Nigerian, you want to speak English so that you don't forget English. So we're speaking Russian most of the time. But I forgot my native tongue, which was Ijebu. And I never spoke Ijebu before. I never spoke any, even Yoruba before I was 12. I was speaking Ijebu as my first language. That one, in fact, I was watching a television program and as I heard somebody speaking something and I thought, oh, is that Ondo? They said, no, that is Ijebu. I didn't even recognize it. That's number one. Number two, even Yoruba itself. In fact, 2 years or three, maybe a few years ago, I had to ask somebody to be teaching me Yoruba language. Otherwise, I could understand it, but I couldn't even speak it. And the one time when I went to Nigeria, I could speak a little. I thought I could speak it, but when I began to speak to my mother, it was Russian language that was coming out. And the guy who was near me said, "Oh, it's Russian you are speaking." I didn't even realize it. So this is one of things that I miss. I really want to go back, try to recover at least Yoruba language. And then the food, the good thing now is that in the West these days, you can get Nigerian food or African food, thank God. So that's not a big problem anymore. But another thing that I miss strongly in Africa is the environment, the fact that despite all the problems, that you see all around, despite the chaos, you see people who are happy. In Europe and in America, where there are no problems, you could say, compared to Africa, people are in depression. People are using tablets to sleep. Things are too cold here. But in Africa, despite all the problems, you still see life. I mean, I miss that. I also miss the contrast, the contrast of, I mean, so many contrasts in Africa. The colors, oh no, yeah.
Thank you very much, Sunday Adileja, founder, senior pastor of the Embassy of the Blessed Kingdom of God for All Nations, an evangelical charismatic megachurch in Kiev, Ukraine. Though the Russian invasion of Ukraine by Russia disrupted some things, but his ministry is still ongoing, and this man has authored over 400 books. Thank you so much for talking to us today. Now, about your the language issue. The good thing is that you proved your professor wrong, who actually thought at the time that you couldn't learn Russian language. Now you think in Russia, you speak Russian, then when you want to speak Yoruba, you're speaking Russia. Then another good thing is that there's an Ijebu man who can take you on some refresher course so that you can gain back the ability to speak Yoruba. This is the Ijebu man, Femi. Thank you for being with us, Sunday Adilaja. And that's the show. It's been a wonderful one. Next time, when Look Exclusive is coming your way, it's going to be another interesting guest that will bring to you. Thank you so much for your time. I am blessed in AHA. Femi?
It's a pleasure being here, and you know, I have a blend of Ijebu and Ikiti, you know,
Okay.
and so for me, it doesn't matter where you come from. It's all about Nigeria, it's all about Africa, and about the world. So it's been an interesting conversation with Dr. Adelaja, and I know there are lessons to take away from that. And that's been Souk exclusive at this time. We'll return another time to have more guests and, in fact, more special exclusive. Stay with us.